Hi there, it's Paulie here. So, there's a very cool game I want to talk to you today. I'll get out of my system. Yes, it's Blücher.
I am Frau Blücher.
Yes, Blücher. Napoleonic rules, and they're very, very good. So these are by Sam Mustafa, Honor Games. Now, Sam is a rather brilliant historian and an excellent game designer. His website, Honor Games, has a ton of really good stuff on it. Go and have a look. But Blücher is superb. Now, this is a set of Napoleonic rules designed for big picture games. You can play Waterloo. You can play any of the big battles from the 1809 campaigns. You can play Peninsular Wars and so on. I think they're beautifully adapted for 6mm, but I've seen people play them in 28s and 15s. But the great thing about these rules is you actually don't need miniatures to play. They can be played with cards. Now, you can purchase the cards from the website, or you can get them as PDFs and print them out yourselves, but they're basically playing card size. So, these playing cards in the default game, that footprint represents the area occupied by around about sort of a brigade. It might be, say, 4 battalions kind of sort of infantry, maybe 2,000 to 3,000 men, but you can change that scale if you want to play smaller or larger battles. You can adapt. Now, what you do is these footprints, these brigades, have a series of icons that you'll get on them, which give specific powers, abilities to these units. Obviously, there's infantry, cavalry and artillery, the basic building blocks, which is what makes Napoleonic such a great game. The combined arms of these 3 different types of unit makes the game. But you have on the unit footprint on the card, you have marked its élan, its effectively its effectiveness. Partially it's manpower, but it's also kind of spirit and training. As the unit takes damage, this whittles down. You can place these cards into card protectors and just mark them with marker. And so as the unit takes damage, these whittle down. Now these boxes, these numbers are also the number of dice that it will be rolling in combat. So as you take damage, you become less combat effective, until eventually you get very, very low, in which case certain actions cannot be done anymore. You can't advance towards the enemy and so on. And then when it reaches 0, the unit routes off. You can, of course, rally them. But these little icons mark special things down the side. So for infantry, they can be marked to say they are very efficient at skirmishing. They have a substantial amount of skirmishers attached. They have special light infantry units that are broken up, like the British have their 95th Rifles and so on, where extra companies are thrown into different brigade skirmish lines to reinforce. British are usually very good skirmishers because they've got light companies, but all the companies are trained to skirmish. French are usually really good skirmishers. Some, like the Russians and Austrians, are not. They can be marked for being really efficient at volley fire. So when you get into the closer volleys, you get a bonus. Again, a lot of British, very good at that. You can also get a little shield icon, which is essentially steady. It's a unit that is very stubborn in the defense. Old Guard and so on will often have that. Russian troops will often have that. You can also have, some infantry brigades can have a small cavalry unit attached to them. A lot of Austrian avant-garde units had this, and some of the Prussian late war ones, they'll have like a Landwehr brigade, and it's got like a cavalry company placed in with the brigade. They get some interesting bonuses too. Units that normally get a skirmishing bonus don't get them if they're facing an infantry brigade that's got integral cavalry, because the cavalry can basically lunge out and just wipe the board of the skirmishers. So they're very rare, but that's kind of an interesting little thing. You can attach artillery to these brigades, which gives them extra firepower. When you are actually laying out like a division, you'll be given infantry, cavalry, artillery units, what you can do is you can take an artillery unit and you can break it up into essentially prolonged guns, which you're adding into different foot battalions. So you're giving them guns as firepower rather than concentrating your guns to use as a single unit. A French player, is going to concentrate his guns. I don't know, maybe Austrians or British or someone want to actually, bolster up the firepower of the guys in the line. Whatever. All these things were tried at the time. All of them worked. So cavalry and so on, they can be marked as being particularly good at shock. The artillery, some of it can be marked as being very, very mobile. So that becomes your horse artillery. And the horse artillery, it can both fire and move in the same turn. It can be marked as heavy artillery, longer range, somewhat less mobile, more damaging. Now, the artillery units are not marked for their élan. They're instead marked for their ammunition. Every time they fire, they remove a box. And the first boxes have quite a few number of dice, but so their first shot is, woohoo, it's a big frenzy. They've got cannon to spare and the gunners aren't fatigued and everything's hunky-dory. But second and third shots, it starts to, settle down a bit. And then as they run out of ammunition, it tapers off. When they get to zero, the batteries withdraw. So you kind of got to be careful about how you use your artillery. There are leaders and so on, and there's an extensive list of leaders and so on in here with their characteristics, but there are personality traits that go with leaders. Some of these guys are great cavalry leaders, some of these guys are very stubborn, some of these guys are extremely fierce or very inspiring and so on. They all have effects in the game. So, given this layout, it's really a beautifully simple game. This is a great game to introduce new players to Napoleonics with, because it's got very little fuss and bother, but it's superbly accurate. For an experienced player, beautiful, because it's clean, and this is done by an absolute expert in the period. They're lovely, lovely rules. Every measurement is done by base widths of the card. So if you come in and you just want to use your figures from another system that doesn't have that same footprint, use them, as long as both of you are kind of using the same scale. All measurements are done in base widths. Now, for firing, up to one base width away from you, it's presumed to be volleys, and that's where the volley abilities come in. And 2 base widths away for infantry, it is skirmish, so that's where the skirmish comes in. Skirmish only rolls about half as many dice. It's not very decisive at all. Close combat, we actually move face to face. That's not necessarily RUR bayonets if you're infantry. That is moving in close to close range volleys. And it's very decisive. Once you get in close like that, one or the other of you is kind of going to knuckle under. There's some really interesting changes to the different armies over time. So this book has army lists for everyone, including Ottoman Turks. Thanks, Sam. You'll find things like what you often conceive of as French, here's the cuirassiers, so obviously they're going to be shock, cavalry, etc., etc., etc. High élan, because, they must have, they've got armour, etc. Past that 1812 period, you suddenly see, well, hang on, the dragoons, who were kind of not so good. Now, dragoons and cuirassiers in the French are kind of equal. A lot of the French heavy cavalry has lost its shock ability. The horses aren't very good anymore. And you'll see a lot of the Prussian stuff and so on starting to get really good. And the Austrians and so on are starting to level up a bit. Lots of stuff, lots of interesting, the smaller nations and so on. So a British army in the peninsula is going to reflect it properly. It's not going to be someone just all with this high skirmish, high volley, superb infantry. Yeah, there's a British corps which are very good, but you've got a lot of other troops there, which is your Portuguese and your Spanish and a lot of little German allied nations and so on. And that's the thing with playing bigger scale Napoleonics. I grew up playing FX Napoleonics, which is great, and you'd have a couple of battalions on the thing, on the board, and everyone's got to have their guard because everyone likes painting the pretty guard. But the thing is that it wasn't really a good reflection, because those elite troops, when you're actually running something like Waterloo scale, elite troops are a very small part of the board that they're actually controlling. So small that you're going to do exactly what they did do. You're going to keep them back for those vital things. When you've got shock cavalry, the French stuff that's good, that remains, you know, high shock value and so on, that goes into a shock reserve, and you're going to use that when you see an opportunity. Movement's very simple, very crisp. What you're doing is you've got a mark on the front of that card. You pivot around the front of the card and then move. You can move, interpenetrate through friendly units and so on, because it's several battalions in that area, so you know you're wheeling people out of the way. And very simple. You've got a nice action system, and this is a cool thing I like. When it's your turn, the opposing player rolls 3 dice in secret, you know, just in a cup, boomf. And without touching them, he can take a look at them, and he just keeps a note of that. The other player, it costs them, you know, actions to move. To move individual units costs an action. Groups that are in the same core, if they're within like a couple of base widths of each other, you can do a group move for them, which costs you about 2 points, etc. But they announce the move, the other player subtracts that from the value and tells them whether they've run out of action points or not. So if you've only got 4 action points left and you book like a mighty 5 action point move, you can still do it, but then the other player says you're out of actions, turns over. So you've got to be careful planning incredibly extravagant things where things are going all over the place, because you don't know how many actions you've got before your turn ends. Sure, it's likely to be, you know, it's 3d6, 9 to 12, but it might have been a roll of 3, or it could be 18 and you could be, you know, blessed by the gods, but you don't know that. I like that. It's a great little way of putting some uncertainty in the whole thing. Really nice mechanism. Little rules for when you take a certain amount of casualties, game's over, and so on. Now, as I said, these rules come with army lists for everything. But the neat thing about Blücher is you have card sets that Sam has done on his site, and all the campaign notes, 4 different campaigns. All that research is kind of done for you. You want to play Waterloo, it's there. The 100 Days campaign and everything is there. Card decks done for every unit, for every group, and there's your campaign, there's your maps. He's done the same for, you know, 1809 stuff, there's Peninsula stuff, there's some 1812. So some really nice, just buy and go. And in PDFs, this really doesn't cost much. You can print these cards out and you're ready. Now, to do this in miniatures, what you can do is put the card information on the bottom, or make the base but leave a little trail at the back of the base that's got your notes of what that unit is. You can even make that clear, you know, just a clear area, and write in it if you want one set of figures that might represent different things in different games. Easy. So, and what I like about this in 6mm is that the instead of the usual rows of troops that people just see on these boards, if you're doing it in 6mm, well, you know, I've got a card yay big, so you will have you can put a couple of battalions down up front, and I've got 2 more held back in my reserve, and I've got my skirmish line out the front. I've got my little brigadier on horseback. He's riding between the lines, keeping a look on things. If you know you're going to have attached artillery, you can put a little, you know, prolonged gun on the side. So it's got that wonderful diorama quality to it that 6mm lets you do. And then when you're looking at the battlefield, it actually looks like actual formations of troops, you know, instead of just these sort of rows of miniatures. I think this is a terrific game. Highly, highly recommended. Go and take a look at it. That larger scale of conflict allows you to actually play in full-on historical battles, but as I said, you can change the figure scale if you want to do smaller things. Like some of the Peninsular War battles are quite small. Those cards suddenly become regiments or battalions rather than brigades. So go and have a look. Sam Mustafa, great guy. The playtest group are all actually old, one of the playtest groups anyway, are all old friends of mine from university who are all great gamers. Go out and have a look. Blücher, you will not be disappointed. Cheers.
Blücher!